This guest we have today is going to knock your socks off. This gentleman is not about motivation. He's about determination. He's about changing the way you think that you shouldn't even have thought about before. When was the last time you thought about something, but you didn't really think about it? Terry Tucker is a gentleman that's going to change your perspective on what is and what isn't going to happen. Creating curiosity by asking better questions. This is Shed Talk. Terry, thank you very much for being on Shed Talk. How you doing?
I am great, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Well, you know what, Terry? It was interesting because you and I got together just probably about 20 minutes ago and just had a quick conversation about health, wealth, and mindset. And one of the greatest things that you've had is, what is an unstoppable or unshakable behavior out there?
That's a great question. What's an unstoppable behavior? I think one of the biggest things that prevents people from doing things is fear. Fear is just this huge monster that sits out there, and it's like, and I've done this in my life. One of the things I talk about is that most people think with their fears and their insecurities instead of using their minds. And I think when we do that, I know I've done that. You want to start a project or get involved in a business and you kind of pull back and you're like, ooh, wait a minute, maybe I'm not smart enough. Maybe I don't have enough information. Or what will people think about me if I fail? That's thinking with our fears and our insecurities. That's not thinking with our minds. And whenever I get an opportunity to speak to especially young people, I always tell them, if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be those things you did. They're going to be these things you didn't do. And then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
So when you get these young people and they're all of a sudden they're motivated, they're determined, they're ready to go in and get into doing whatever they're going to do, how do you actually encourage them to keep focused on that one task at hand and as like motivation or determination that they actually create action and keep moving forward? What do you push them with?
I push them with that motivation's not enough. Motivation's intrinsic. I mean, we think of it as, like I'll listen to a piece of music. I'll watch a movie and it'll get me motivated. Well, that's great. But I think I talk about this in a sort of a three-legged stool. Motivation's great and you need it and nobody else can do it for you. Nobody's going to motivate you to do something. You have to motivate yourself. But the other two things that go along with that are discipline and good habits. So if you are highly motivated but aren't disciplined and have terrible habits, very hard to be successful in life. But if you're well disciplined and have great habits, but you're not motivated, again, hard to be successful in life. You need all three. So I try to get them to look at, okay, you're motivated, that's great. What are your habits? What are you doing that is leading you to be successful in life? And do you have the discipline to implement those habits along that road? If you have all three and a little bit of grit, you're pretty much unstoppable.
So as a young guy and you're unstoppable and you're doing this, now I want to fast track it to all of a sudden we're young guys. Heard that whole thing. Okay, we're motivated. We got all of it, but all of a sudden now we're in our 50s. We're entrepreneurs, or we think we are. Then all of a sudden we lose that oomph after 50. Is there anything else that you would say that would actually encourage the older generation, especially us guys? Okay, so I'm looking at myself between the ages of, like, I'm 57 years old, and I talk to a lot of people that are in my age group that suicide rate's high, and everything seems to be really hard on them. And what experiences can you share about the people? Because you talk to a lot of people and you've been on over like 900 podcasts, you're motivational speaking, and you hit that mindset, especially with the older generation. Can you dig deeper on that aspect of the 50 plus?
So I was diagnosed with terminal cancer when I was almost 52, so 51 years old. And they said, you'll be dead in 2 years. And I thought, well, gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And one of the jobs I've had in my life is I was a SWAT hostage negotiator for the Cincinnati Police Department. And I had an opportunity to negotiate with people that were suicidal. And it's always interesting to sort of talk to the people behind the scenes after you resolve the situation. What did you see? What did you notice? Well, I noticed their behavior change. How did it change? Well, they were giving away things. They were talking about death. They were doing things that were like, well, that's not like them. I said, did you ever think of asking them, like, hey, are you? And we did this as negotiators. If we thought somebody was going to harm themselves or kill themselves, we would flat out just put it out there. Hey, Kevin, are you thinking about killing yourself? Now, if you're not, you're going to be like, no, Terry, you're an idiot. Why would you even say that? But if you are, I may have just opened the door to have someone say, oh my gosh, somebody sees me. I'm here, but people don't see me. I don't feel that they see me. So anybody who's listening to us, if you take nothing away from what we talk about today, if you think somebody might be looking to harm themselves or kill themselves, ask them. You're not going to put the idea into their mind, but if you ask them, you may open the door to say, oh my God, somebody sees me. Can I tell you my story? I mean, you think about the guys that take their entire locker home in high school, with all their books. And it's like, yeah, that's not normal. I mean, I wasn't that smart, but I didn't take my whole locker home, from time to time. But when you see something like, hey, is everything okay? Well, yeah, everything's. Are you sure everything? Push it a little bit. So I would say that. And then the other thing I would say is, when we're in our 50s, we get to a point, I think, where we're expected to be successful, however you define that term in your life. And when we're not, all of a sudden, like you say, oh, well, then maybe my life isn't worthwhile. I have no value in life. And Kevin, I would like to kind of look at things differently. I've seen, and you probably have as well, so many people that feel they're born empty. And that when they get out of school and get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then they feel their job is to fill up their empty self. I got to I got to have the best job, drive the nicest car, live in the greatest house, have the greatest family. But what I found in life, it's not about what you get. It's about what you give. So if you change that dynamic, if you change that paradigm in your mind, all of a sudden you've decided that my value is not by what I get. My value is what I give to other people with my experience, with my background, with my money, with my knowledge, whatever that is. And if you can do that with other people, now you have a purpose in life in your 50s. So maybe you're not rich. Who cares? I mean, at the end of your life, you can't take that money with you. But what can you do to make a legacy, to weave something into the hearts of other people after you're gone?
That's a powerful statement, and you're looking at it, and you make it sound really easy. And I want to dive a little bit deeper because all of a sudden, to give back, all of a sudden, here you are, you're self-centered, and not you. I'm just using as an
No, I
individual.
mean, we all are. We're
Yeah,
all narcissistic in a way. Yeah.
that is so true. And here we are, we're self-absorbed in ourselves because of our health, wealth, and mindset. Because we're all of a sudden we're into ourselves, but because we're not looking after ourselves in shape and in style. What becomes the changing point? And I'm going to use you again because you lost your foot, correct? And how did
2018, I had my foot amputated. Correct.
and why did you have that happen?
Cancer. I had a rare form of melanoma that appeared on the bottom of my foot.
And then from there, and how did you get yourself through that aspect of now that goes back? Now we're going to go back to when you're younger, 18, you had cancer, and then the mindset. How did you develop your mindset?
So it was 2018 when I had that. So I was not when I was 18, but how did I advance? I was an athlete. I was a high school athlete. I had 3 knee surgeries in high school, and I remember when I went back playing basketball after those knee surgeries, my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, hey, you're probably a step slower since your surgeries, and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And Kevin, I remember thinking, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level, and college coaches are still reaching out about the opportunity to play for their college or university. I learned at 15 that I needed to change the narrative. I needed to change the paradigm. And where I think we get into trouble, the Cleveland Clinic, and so many other people do this too, but I'll use the Cleveland Clinic numbers, estimate that we have 60 to 70,000 thoughts that pass through our mind every day. About 3,500 of those thoughts are new thoughts, and our brains operate at a speed of about 1,000 words a minute. But the interesting thing is your brain can still only hold one thought at a time. So when you get these thoughts into your mind, the thoughts themselves are neutral. They're arbitrary. They just come in and they go. Where we get in trouble is when we start thinking about those thoughts. We attach memories or emotions or something else to those thoughts. And now they either lift us up, we're excited, we're going to go conquer the world, or we're down, we're depressed, life is against us. So it's really kind of figuring out what message you want your brain to have. And I learned I don't like these negative messages. I'm turning it to something different, something positive. So I'm always talking positive to myself. Bruce Lee, the old martial artist, used to say, be very careful how you talk to yourself because we all become what we think.
Now, would you look at it as building on that, like an imposter syndrome as well?
It's interesting. I don't like the words imposter syndrome, but I was on a podcast with a former National Football League player here in the United States. I mean, this guy was like 6'8", like 310 pounds. He played on several professional football teams. He made it to the pinnacle of his sport. And we did the podcast and we were talking afterwards. And he said, Terry, when I started my podcast, I didn't think anybody would pay attention to me. I didn't think anybody would care about what I had to say. And I said, Marcus, how could you say that? You've made it to the pinnacle of professional athletics. I mean, the percentage of people that never do that is so infinitesimal, it's not even worth talking about. How could you think you didn't have a voice that other people would be interested in hearing? But even a guy like that who'd made it to the top felt I didn't have anything to contribute. And it's interesting, and I'll tell you a quick story. I had a nurse who, when I initially met this nurse, about 25 years old, so a young woman, already a nurse, but learning how to do things in the unit where I get treated I still have tumors in my lungs. And I remember she came in about 6 months after she was learning and was taking care of me by herself. She said, Terry, I got a story I want to tell you, but I don't know how to tell it to you. And Kevin, I didn't know how to respond to that. I mean, what do you say to somebody like that? I said, well, hope you decide you want to tell me the story. Eventually she comes in and she said, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I'd had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing. I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And she said, and I see how you react. I have a terrible reaction to my medicine. And she said, you come back every single day, no matter how bad it is. And I went back in your file and I read, you had your foot amputated in 2018, you had your leg amputated in 2020. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, Kevin, I would have had no idea that my life had such a positive impact on people. So everybody who's listening to us now, don't ever think your life doesn't matter. Don't ever think your story isn't important, because I promise you, there are people out there that you don't even know that are watching how you handle your adversity in life and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes.
That's amazing. And I'm going to go back into that again, because I want to ask you another question and get you into that. What has been one of your biggest success stories, or a story that you've been a part of? A successful story. Everybody would say, well, what's the worst habit or the worst thing that ever happened? I want to know, what is the greatest thing that you're so proud of that you've accomplished and done right now?
I mean, without a doubt, my wife and I raising our daughter. I mean, we have.
I'm going to cop out. You can't use that. What is it? Family's a cop out. Family's cop out. Everybody uses that one right away. I'm going to call that. I'm going to call it right now. It's family, of course. Yeah.
So I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this story. About 6 months ago, I got an email from a young man who I had no idea who this guy was. He reached out and he said, I just listened to a podcast episode you did, and I really needed to hear it today. It was something that really touched my heart. And I said, great. I said, what was the name of the podcast? And he emailed it to me. And Kevin, I didn't remember it. I had no idea so I had to go back and look it up. It was a podcast that I had done 2.5 years ago, that he had found the episode, listened to, and touched his heart at that point in time. I mean, these podcasts, things that you do, things that I'm on as guests, these are evergreen. They're going to be around forever. Somebody may hear this 10 years from now and say, I needed to hear that at that moment. That's why I love doing podcasts. That's why I love being a guest on shows. And I'm sure that's why you do what you do. What you're doing lasts forever. And that was such an important just an important event in my life for this young man to read. He didn't have to tell me about it, but just to reach out and say, hey, you made a difference in my life by something you did 2.5 years ago.
Hey, take a minute and smash that subscribe button, and let's get back to the episode. Now, one of your speaking tours, because you go out and do talks, what has been one of the most funnest talk that you've ever done? Nice, funnest, most exciting talk that you've ever done, and a location, and just something that aha moment, that storytelling in the actual being there. Because doing a talk is very difficult. Being up in front of people doesn't matter if you're a professional or your first time. It's that aha moment. That what did it make you feel like?
I did a talk in Colorado Springs, Colorado, at the Broadmoor for the South Carolina Bankers Association's annual convention, and they'd come to town and they had a prayer breakfast. They said, "Would you come and speak at our prayer breakfast?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'd be happy to." And I'm like, "Do you have any parameters?" "No, you can talk about whatever you want." There were people. There was a couple that came up to me after the talk, and they were holding up their cell phone, and I'm like, okay. She said, our 18-year-old son has really bad depression right now. He's really upset about an event in his life. And she said, we called him, clicked our phone, and just held it up and let him listen to what you had to say. And I almost broke down crying. I'm like, oh my God. I mean, you would think you would have impact on people in the room, but now these people in the room are expanding that. They're calling back to South Carolina and saying, hey, listen to this guy. You might come out of your depression, or you might feel better after hearing what he's been through and how he attacks or handles his life. And that just, I love being with people. People have asked me, how do you want to be remembered? And honestly, Kevin, I could care less about being remembered. I'm not real interested in that. But what I'd like now is to develop connections, deep connections. Social media lets us stay on the surface. There's a professor at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with his students. The idea is you go out and you get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you go deep with somebody. So you sit down next to somebody, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. How are you? Question 1. Question 2, and I'm just making this up. What do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Question 3, have you always wanted to be a doctor? No, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or yeah, my mother was a doctor and she died of breast cancer at 40, and so I'm honoring her legacy by following in her footsteps. Whatever they tell you, it doesn't matter what they say. Now you're deep with somebody. Now you understand their why in life, why they do what they do. That I love more than anything else. Just trying to figure out people's why by asking them questions. I just love doing that.
All right, now let's get into that. What do you really want to do?
How so?
Exactly the same question. We're sitting on the bus together.
Okay.
I'm right beside you right now, and I'm going to ask you that one question. All right, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years, and what do you want to do? And I'm sitting on the bus with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to make a difference in people's lives. I mean, that's my soul. I don't want to make money. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be rich. I just want to contribute in a positive way to other people's lives. I've learned that about cancer. Power, money, wealth, influence, great stuff. Nothing wrong with it. I think it's super. But I wrote my first book, and it's a book about success. And even after I published it, immediately I was like, there's something nagging at me, something tugging on me. I need to write another book that also is about a word that starts with S, and that word is significance. Success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we do for others. Now, don't get me wrong. I think you can be both. You can be successful and you can be significant in life. But I'm literally 99% done with that second book about significance. And that's what I want to do. I want to take that and the book about success and just offer them to people in a way that, oh my God, I don't have all the answers, but I've learned a lot of things in the 65 years I've been on this earth.
All right, let's ask some more. Let's get significant more about being significant. What does that mean to be significant?
It means literally going deep with somebody. It means being there to help them with the understanding that I can't solve your problems. That's one thing I learned as a hostage negotiator. I'm not going to solve your problem. However this is going to end is going to be determined by you. I mean, you may shoot yourself. You may come out peacefully. I may have to send the tactical team in to get you, but I can't solve this. I can just lead you by asking certain questions. And one of the things we did as hostage negotiators is we asked how and what questions. We stayed away from why questions because when we were growing up, I mean, my parents did this. Your parents probably did too. You know, you do something wrong. Why did you do that? So immediately when somebody asks you a why question, it's like, well, Kevin, why did you wear that shirt today? Ooh, wait a minute. Does Terry not like the shirt I'm wearing? I can get at the same answer by saying, Kevin, what made you decide to wear that shirt today? That's a much softer question that leads me to the same answer. So, how and what questions? Those are the things that I do a lot. And I'll end with this story. My wife has been in the financial services industry for 40 years, and we used to go to the obligatory Christmas party. And I used to say, all right, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go in. I'm going to find 5 of your colleagues. And at the end of the night, I'm going to come out. I'm going to tell you everything about them. You know, how they met their spouse, where they went to college, how many kids they have, everything. I said, and then Monday morning when you go to work, they're going to come to you and they're going to tell you what a great guy I am. But they're not going to know one single thing about me because people rarely reciprocate. Where'd you go to college? Oh, where did you go to college? We talked about it. We're narcissistic. We love talking about ourselves. But I love finding out about people. So I just go in and ask them a bunch of questions. We always used to tell our daughter, you want to be a great person? You want to be somebody that's liked? Just ask people about themselves and shut up.
And they'll go forever.
Yeah.
Now, the podcast, you've been on like 600 podcasts. How many? 700?
700.
You're saying? Now, your first podcast to your one you just did today, how much different? And now that would have been a few years ago. For if you're going back and let's go year 1, 2, 3, 4, that's like 5-6 years ago for sure, minimum. What was it like doing your first podcast to win the podcast today? Because technology's changed, AI's changed, everything in where we're at has changed. What was the first one like?
It's terrible. I had started a speaking business and COVID hit. And so, you know, everything shuts down and nobody's doing anything virtually or even in person. So a friend of mine reached out and said, Terry, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And I said, sure. What's a podcast? Literally, honest, Kevin, that's what I said. I had no idea what a podcast was. He said, well, and he explained it to me. I said, okay. And Kevin, I was terrible. I had Post-it notes all around the camera. He would ask me a question and I'd lean in and I'd read one of the Post-its. I provided zero value to anybody who listened to that podcast. I was terrible. But then I thought, well, first time I drove a car, wasn't any good at it. First time I cooked a meal, I think I burned the water. First time I studied algebra, wasn't any good at it, but I liked it. And I remember I was talking to my publisher and I said, Scott, I listen to every podcast I've been on. I said, because I once heard somebody tell me, never make a point without telling a story and never tell a story without making a point. I said, so I listen. How many times do I say or huh or that? Do I have a better story to illustrate that point, or can I condense that story? I want to be better at it. And I never decided like I want to be on 1,000 podcasts. There was never a number. It was just I enjoyed doing it. It worked with my cancer treatment schedule. And it was a way for me. It's hard for me to travel being in a wheelchair and having one leg. So I can do podcasts with people in New Zealand and Australia and Europe and Asia and Africa and China and get to travel without leaving my own home. So it's just been a tremendous blessing for me.
Now, where you're at right now, and you still have cancer, right? And then what do you have? What kind of cancer do you have right now? You were saying
I have a rare form of melanoma that has nothing to do with sun exposure.
None to do with. And what do they have to do to go to the next level for curing that?
So I'm very fortunate. I've been on a clinical trial drug for the last 4 years for the tumors I have in my lungs that does nothing to the cancer. But the way cancer proliferates in the body is it secretes an enzyme or a protein that hides it from your immune system. And all this drug does is go in and wipe out that protein or enzyme. So just like a cold or a flu virus, my own immune system can look at that and say, hey, that doesn't belong there. We need to attack it. So for the last 4 years, this medication has kept my tumors at bay and kept the tumors from spreading. And so it beats me up when I do it, and I do it every 3 weeks. But I'll take getting beat up, for a week if I have time with my family, time with our daughter, and hopefully grandkids someday and things like that. So that's what I go through. That's what I deal with, and it's an opportunity for me to sort of test my mettle. This sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck, so to speak.
Yeah, it sucks to suck. And then when people are listening to you and I'm listening to you and I'm asking and diving in to ask a better question and creating curiosity, because there's people out there that are going through cancer. And then there's people that they know that they have cancer and we just met. And it's actually asking you a better question about how does it make you feel? And how can I help to support you? And like you said, is to truly listen to the other person because you've just brought something to my attention. And I'm going, wow, and you're motivated, you're determined, you've got this whole aura to you where a lot of people would look at the same thing and go, "Man, I wanna be him fighting the same fight that he's fighting. How do I keep my mind as straight and honest as who he is?" And that's a powerful, powerful way to be.
It is, and it. I think part of it is being part of something that's bigger than yourself. I have a very strong faith in God, and I honestly believe that at this point in my life, Kevin, I should have, like I said, I was given 2 years to live back in 2012. I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees because of a medication reaction, which 108 degrees you're usually not alive. I had these big tumors in my lungs after I had my leg amputated, and I remember my doctor showed me my CAT scan, and I don't have any medical background, but I could kind of look at it and be like, oh, well, that sure doesn't look like it belongs there. I mean, I had these big tumors. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces. And I remember saying to my oncologist, how was I alive? And Kevin, till the day I die, I will never forget this. He put his head down, he shook his head no, and then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know because you shouldn't have been, which said to me that God's not done with me yet. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. But what I think God is doing now is using my infirmity, using my malignancy to show people his goodness, mercy, love, caring, help. And that's what I'm doing. And like I said, when I die, I don't care about dying. I made peace with dying a long time ago. But I think we all should concentrate on dying. The old Stoic philosophers used to talk about memento mori, which is a Latin phrase that means remember death. Remember that you're going to die, not for the sake of death, but for what it does to sort of crystallize how important life is for you, and that you have such a limited time on the face of this earth. Even if you live for 100 years, we're here and we're gone. Make that life purposeful, make that life meaningful, make a difference in somebody else's life.
That's powerful. And I wanna go again on this because it's really interesting because there's a lot of people out there, friends, families, and I'm gonna talk more about friends. All of a sudden, an individual, and use yourself, has cancer. And a lot of people all of a sudden look at you, okay, or an individual, and then they go, "Oh, I don't know what to say to him." What would you say to those people? Say, "Listen, you have cancer," and the person's doesn't know how to communicate. It's kind of like having death. Someone dies, and then all of a sudden your friends don't ever call you. And then all of a sudden, I don't know. I don't. What am I supposed to say? What would you give advice about people that it's okay to talk to you? Like, what would you find? What have you experienced with that?
Sure, I actually wrote a little bit about this in my book, and I've done this in my life. It's like somebody's, even if it's something positive, you're going in the hospital to have a baby or something like that. And what do people always say? Hey, if you need anything, give me a call. If you need anything, reach out. Well, guess what? I'm going to go have my leg amputated. I'm sorry, I don't have time to reach out to you and tell you what I need. I need the same things at my house that you need at your house. I need, the grocery shopping done, or the dog walked, or the grass cut, or my kids taken to school, whatever that ends up being. Don't sit on the sidelines and convince yourself you're playing in the game. Get out there and do something. Hey, I went to the store and I stocked your refrigerator. Maybe it's not stuff that I'll eat. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it's stuff I like. Don't don't think about it too much. Just do something. Get involved in another person's life. And the other thing I'll say about that is, what do you need to say? You don't need to say anything. Just sit with me. I mean, when I have my reactions from my medication, it's really bad. I shake violently. I throw up. All that kind. I cry. I get down. I feel sorry for myself. So, I mean, I don't want anybody to think that, there's no S on my chest. I do not have a cape and fly around with magical powers. I'm a human being like everybody else. I hurt. But when I find that I'm in that woe is me, oh, this is terrible. I feel terrible. I find a very easy way to get out of that is to just go say hi to somebody. I can sit in the waiting room waiting for my treatment and just look at people that have that deer in headlights stare. They're scared. This is their first time there. They don't know what to expect. I can just wheel over in my wheelchair. How you doing today? You look like you're a little upset. And now I don't say anything. I mean, I'll talk your ear off, but I'm real good at being quiet too. I learned that as a negotiator. Use silence. It'll get other people to talk. And when people talk, they burn off a lot of that emotional energy that they don't feel they can sitting in a cancer waiting room. So just be kind to other people. Ask them about themselves. Going back to what we were talking about, that party, finding people and what they do in their lives. Now all of a sudden they're seen. They feel seen. They just don't feel like I'm a cancer patient. I'm a human being.
What is the one thing that you would tell anybody right now and in the future what they should do or shouldn't do or would do or anything in life? What is that one thing that you would love to tell somebody?
I guess I would. There's a couple of things that come to mind, but I'll say this, especially when we're talking about encapsulating everybody. It's more important who you work with and who you work for than it is the work that you do. Find people in your life that care about you. Find people in your life that are willing to invest in you. Find people in your life that will support you, and hitch your wagon to those people and climb your mountains together.
That is amazing. You know what, Terry? Thank you very much for being on Shed Talk and having these great conversations. You know what? Smash like that button on Shed Talk and subscribe for some more. Thanks, Terry. That was awesome. And thanks for joining us on Shed Talk.
Well, Kevin, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you.
Now you know. Shed Talk.